This is the AJAZZ AC081 in the Peace colorway. It's another in-stock CNC aluminium keyboard I've got hold of to try and showcase some alternatives to the premium group buy keyboards. In the last video we looked at the AC067, the 65% version of this one, and it was a pretty nice keyboard. Some of the good bits from that one feature in this 75% version, and I'm excited to see what it's like. Before we get started, I just want to thank WhatGeek for sending this one over for a review. Check out the WhatGeek website, they have a great collection of keyboards and accessories, and with the affiliate links in the description or discount code KEEPFACE, you get 10% off. I'll do my best to link up everything used in this video below. The price on this one is between $160 and $200 depending on where you pick it up from, and it does lose one key feature compared to the AC067, which is the wireless capability. This one is obviously the 75% layout. It has 81 keys and the badge in the top right where you'd usually see a key or an encoder knob. It has a CNC aluminium case, and the Peace version with its grey case is anodized, while the Cat's Pad version with its white case is epoxy coated through a process called cataphoresis, which is funny and I wonder if it's intentional. It's a gasket mount keyboard, has a north-facing hot-swappable PCB with per key RGB. It has an aluminium plate. It comes with EVA case foam and a silicone plate pad. It comes with plate mount stabilizers, JSA profile double shot PBT keycaps, and Gateron Box White switches, which are a clicky switch. As I say, the only real difference to the spec on the AC067 outside of the layout is the lack of wireless connectivity with this one, and in spite of that it holds the same price tag. In the box you get the fully assembled keyboard, a braided cable, a switch and keycap puller, some additional top pour-on gaskets, a bunch of novelty keycaps, and the manual. As with the AC067, we're missing Mac keycaps as the keyboard is compatible with Windows and Mac operating systems. I didn't do a stock out-of-the-box typing test, as clicky switches don't give you the keyboard sound profile, they just give you a clicky switch sound profile. For the unmodded typing test, I've installed a set of lubed Akko Radiant Red linears so we can actually hear the keyboard. So let's run through some first impressions after the unboxing and the unmodded typing test. I'm calling it unmodded and not stock, as it's not really a stock typing test as I swapped out the switches. On the typing test it's not bad at all, but much like the AC067 it's a little thin and muted, and I would think this is for the same reason as with the AC067, which was there not being much room in the bottom case for acoustics. Like the AC067, this is lightly resolved by removing the case dampening. There is something funky going on with the stabilizers. It definitely feels like they need to be clipped to sort out the bottom out, but it also feels like the wires are too tight in the stems, like when you holy mod with tape that's too thick. Basically the bottom out and top out is mushy. I really don't like the awful light pink / cream colour of the keycaps or the JSA profile. The JSA profile is developed by AJAZZ I think, and it's pretty much just SA profile on rows 1 to 5, but row 6 is messed up. The spacebar slopes down towards the bottom of the keyboard like when you run an inverted cherry spacebar, and the rest of the row is just too low profile for me. I much prefer the higher profile row 6 and the square spacebar you get with SA profile. The last thing on the first impressions before we go more in depth is the USB-C placement. I'm not a fan of this just off-center placement. I prefer the port on the far left as my first choice, but I don't mind it dead center, which you also often see. Just off-center like this just looks a bit weird. Okay, let's get it apart and check out the build and component quality. First we need to get these turd caps off and throw them in the bin. We're going to use the Akko Radiant Reds in the final build, but for now they need to come off, and remember it doesn't come with these, it comes with the Gateron Box White clicky switches. With the switches out you can remove the plate mount stabilizers. Next we need to flip it over and remove the 8 case screws. I do not like the fact that these case screws are Phillips heads. Case screws need to be Torx head or hex head for me, both for the look and to prevent stripping the head. With the case screws out we can flip it over and lift out the plate and PCB assembly. The keyboard doesn't have a daughter board and is wired only, so so there are no wires to unplug. Now we need to disassemble the plate and PCB. We flip it over and remove the 6 screws holding the plate and PCB together. Then we can separate the plate dampening pad, and the PCB. That's the keyboard stripped down into its component parts. The top case, while a little lighter than I expected, is nice quality and houses the badge in the top right and the shine through logo between the navigation keys on the bottom right. Weirdly, only 4 out of the 9 thinner top gaskets are installed. The plate is aluminium and the paint job is very nice in this gunmetal grey colour. I'm pretty sure it's painted and not anodized, but whatever it is, it looks to business and doesn't scratch while hot swapping, which is a real pet peeve for me with badly painted aluminium plates. The silicone plate dampening is really dense and clean looking. The silicone leaves no room for acoustics, but I don't think this is a bad thing with plate dampening. The PCB is nice quality. We've got the perky RGB and the soldered USB-C port instead of a daughter board, which I'll go into a bit later. It's north facing, which means you won't be able to use cherry profile keycaps unless you get long pole switches. The PCB is not compatible with screw-in stabilizers, which I kind of think it should be at this price point. The EVA case dampening is a single thin sheet and does have those hot swap socket marks in it, meaning there is very little space under the PCB for acoustics. The bottom case is where most of the 1.8 kilograms total keyboard weight comes from. It's nice and clean on the inside with seriously chunky bottom pour-on gaskets, which gives the gasket a nice and plush feel with plenty of travel which doesn't rely on flex. The grey anodized and lightly textured finish is really nice and without a mark on it, mainly because it would be very hard to mark this. It's definitely not susceptible to scratching or fingerprints. When we flip it over, we find the AJAZZ lettering CNC'd on the bottom, which is a nice size, not too big, and is a really nice embellishment in my opinion. I wish they hadn't gone for white feet though, black would have been much cleaner. Now let's get on with some mods and the rebuild. Having just modded the AC067, I know exactly what I'm going to do on this one. I'm trying to wean myself off the PE foam mod and creamy sound profile, as it does make everything sound kinda similar, and with so many keyboards in my collection now, I want to lean into the higher tone you naturally get with a lot of CNC aluminium keyboards. That means we're in for an easy build. The first thing we're going to do is install the rest of the top gaskets. For me, this should mean a more consistent sound profile. Next thing to look at is the stabilizers. They were messily factory lubed, and the stems do indeed have the legs which need clipping. These stabilizers don't need it, but I'm not really doing the holy mod anymore really, as it's rarely needed other than on really bad stabilizers with lots of wire rattle, so all we're doing is clipping the stems, lubing the outside of the stems and inside of the housings with Krytox 205 grade 0, then lubing the wires with dielectric grease. Now we just put the plate and PCB assembly back together with the dampening pad using the 6 screws, and I'm going to apply the tape mod for a typing test in this configuration, just for a comparison for you. The tape mod will give a deeper sound profile which some of you may prefer. I'm taking the case dampening out to increase the space under the PCB for acoustics, and because I think it's probably hindering the gasket, and because I think it will be muffling the sound further as it's in contact with the PCB. Next we need to install the stabilizers and test them. While better from clipping and re-lubing, it still doesn't feel like there's enough space in the stems for the wires to move freely through the keystrokes. The bottom out is still messed up. On closer inspection I can see that they've put a round lip in the stem where the wire is inserted, which you see on some other stabilizers like the double shot Akko plate mount stabilizers, and it's to reduce wire rattle. The issue is with these stems they've made the lip too big, which prevents the wire from reaching the fully horizontal position in the stems at the bottom of the keystroke, which is cushioning the bottom of the keystroke, making the bottom out feel mushy and essentially preventing the keys from bottoming out as they should on the short stabilizers. These are Gateron plate mount stabilizers, and this is a huge flaw in my opinion. I don't know if this is a bad batch, but if you have the same issue, it's resolved by filing the lip out of them. So that's all we're going to do. We're going to clean off the lube job that I've put on the stems, file out the lip, re-lube everything, put them back together and reinstall them in the plate. Next we can land the plate and PCB assembly back in the case, but make sure you install this little USB-C port surround again before doing this. Then we can reassemble the case using the 8 screws. And that's us back together. Next we install those lovely Akko Radiant Reds. These are a nice linear switch from the Akko CS lineup with a 53 gram operating force and a 62 gram bottom out force over a 3.5mm travel. For the keycaps I'm going with my favourite budget friendly set. These are the now discontinued Akko Neon MDA profile double shot PBT keycaps. Such a nice set of keycaps and fine with north facing switches. Now we're ready for some typing tests. I'll be changing case dampening and tape mod configuration configurations, and I'll show you the difference from before and after I filed the stabilizer stems. So which did you prefer? I like the deeper tone the tape mod gives, but I also really like the higher tone without the tape mod. I definitely prefer no dampening, so I'll be leaving this one with no dampening and no tape mod to get that higher natural tone from the aluminium case and plate. Finally, let's get into my thoughts and opinions on the AC081. In my opinion, it's a hair ahead of its 65% sister keyboard, the AC067, mainly because of the typing sound and the 75% layout, which I prefer. The AC081 loses the wireless functionality and ditches the daughter board in favour of a soldered USB-C port, both of which being very welcome changes for me. I'm not fussed on wireless these days, and I like not having to tuck wires out of the way to stop them messing around with the gasket mount. The cutout around the USB-C port in the case allows for the movement of the gasket system and the USB-C port without hindrance. This little USB-C port surround piece does a nice job of tidying up the view of the USB-C port from the outside, and it doesn't hinder the gasket or create any unwanted sound. One thing I don't like with these AJAZZ keyboards is that they aren't VIA compatible. The dedicated software for it doesn't let you change the layout itself. You can add macros and stuff, but the layout is fixed, which I don't like. I think at this price point they should be VIA and QMK compatible. On the layout, they've opted to drop two keys or a key and an encoder in favour of the badge in the top right and the shine through logo bottom right. I actually quite like this. I'm not fussed on encoders, and I only really use the page up and page down navigation keys, so I'm down for the embellishments over the additional keys. For me, typing sound and feel is king, and this is a really nice typing keyboard. It's a nice plush gasket system and typing feel, and it's a really nice typing sound with no dampening or sound mods needed, other than to remove the case dampening. The short stabilizers really aren't nice stock, and they shouldn't have the issue they do, as it's just a bad design or maybe a flaw, but once you file them, they're fine. Other than that, the typing experience is really quite exceptional for an entry-level CNC aluminium keyboard. To summarize, I definitely recommend this keyboard if you're all about the typing experience and dig the aesthetic and layout choices, but the absence of QMK and VIA compatibility needs to not be a deal breaker, as you don't get the same level of customization from the dedicated app. I hope this helped you, and don't forget to check out my affiliate links and discount codes below. I'll catch you in the next one.